The scene opens in a crowded bar. It's late at night and the air is filled with laughter and loud conversations. People are enjoying their drinks, chatting, and having fun. A group of friends sits at one of the tables, sharing jokes, while a few others are at the bar itself. Among the noise, there's a man sitting quietly, drinking alone. He doesn't seem bothered by the chaos around him. He's an MMA fighter, but right now, he's just a regular guy enjoying a drink. He doesn't try to stand out or get attention. He just watches the people around him, almost as if he's in his own world. The loud chatter and clinking of glasses don't seem to affect him. At a nearby table, a man notices the fighter sitting alone at the bar. He's had a few drinks, his speech a bit slurred, and his words start to get louder. He looks over at the fighter, then nudges his friend and points at him. "Look at this guy," he says, loud enough for others to hear. "What's he doing here? Looks like he thinks he's tough or something." A few people nearby chuckle, but the fighter doesn't respond. He just keeps sipping his drink, keeping his focus on his glass. But the man isn't done. He raises his voice, now directing his comments at the fighter. "Hey, you think you could fight me? I could take you down with one hand tied behind my back." The crowd begins to shift. Some are laughing, others just watching, unsure of what's about to happen. The fighter doesn't react, still calm, still silent. But the man continues, louder now, convinced he's being funny. The drunk man stands up from his table, stumbling a bit as he walks over to the fighter. The room falls quiet, everyone watching. He stands right next to the fighter, looking down at him, smirking. "You think you're all tough, huh?" The man's voice is full of arrogance now. "What, are you gonna sit there all night and pretend you're some kind of fighter?" The fighter doesn't respond. His eyes stay on his drink, his posture relaxed. He's not making eye contact, not engaging in the man's taunts. But the drunk man isn't backing off. He leans in closer, raising his voice. "You're just a coward, sitting there doing nothing. What, afraid of a real challenge?" There's a moment of silence in the bar as the crowd waits. The tension builds. People are looking around, waiting for the fighter to react. Some of the regulars glance at each other, whispering quietly. Without warning, the man shoves the fighter hard in the shoulder. A rough push that could have knocked anyone off balance. But the fighter doesn't budge. He doesn't flinch. The crowd is now fully focused on what's happening. The man looks angry, expecting some kind of reaction, but the fighter remains still, calm as ever. The fighter slowly stands up, his movements calm and measured. The crowd holds its breath, waiting to see what will happen. The drunk man is still standing there, staring at him, waiting for a fight. His chest is puffed out, his face full of anger. But the fighter doesn't rush into anything. He just stands there, facing the man, his hands relaxed at his sides. He doesn't raise his fists, doesn't make a threatening move. Instead, he takes a deep breath, his gaze steady. "You don't want to do this," the fighter says, his voice calm, almost too calm for the situation. The drunk man laughs, clearly thinking it's all a joke. "What, you scared?" he taunts. "You gonna walk away like a little baby?" But the fighter doesn't react to the insult. He just steps back a little, still calm, still collected. His eyes are locked on the man, not full of anger, but focused and controlled. The crowd is tense now, unsure of what will happen next. They expect the fighter to swing at any moment, to show his skills in a flash of action. Instead, the fighter simply steps back further, giving the man space. The drunk man's face twists with frustration. He shoves the fighter again, harder this time, a desperate push. The fighter takes the force of the push, but doesn't move an inch. The crowd waits, the silence hanging in the air, all eyes on the fighter. The fighter doesn't hesitate. There's no anger in his eyes, just a calm focus. In one smooth, controlled motion, he reaches out, grabs the drunk man's wrist, and twists it gently. The man freezes, his face going pale as he realizes he's caught. The grip isn't aggressive, but it's firm. The fighter isn't hurting him, just holding him in place. The drunk man tries to pull away, but the fighter's hold doesn't loosen. For a brief moment, the man looks around, confused, unsure of what to do. The crowd is completely silent now, all eyes locked on the scene unfolding before them. Some people exchange glances, unsure if they're witnessing a fight or something else entirely. The fighter doesn't push harder. He doesn't throw the man to the ground. He simply uses the hold to guide the man down. Slowly, With controlled precision, the fighter brings him to the floor. The drunk man doesn't slam down, there's no violence in it. It's more like the fighter is gently helping him sit down, his wrists still trapped in the fighter's grip. The drunk man is now sitting on the floor, looking up at the fighter, his pride completely shattered. His face is a mix of confusion and humiliation. The crowd stares in disbelief. They can't quite believe what they just saw. The MMA fighter hasn't thrown a punch, he hasn't shouted, but somehow, he's completely controlled the situation without making a scene. It's almost as if he knew exactly what he was doing from the very start. The fighter kneels down slowly, bringing himself to eye level with the drunk man, still sitting on the floor. The room is completely silent now, the tension thick in the air. Everyone watches, waiting to see what will happen next. The fighter looks the man in the eyes, but there's no anger in his expression. He doesn't seem mad, he doesn't seem excited. He's simply calm, almost peaceful. "This is what happens when you push someone who knows how to fight," he says quietly. His voice isn't loud or threatening, just firm enough to be heard by everyone nearby. The drunk man doesn't say anything. He just sits there, stunned, his mind racing as he tries to process what just happened. His wrist is still held firmly by the fighter, but there's no pain, no force. It's almost like the fighter is reminding him, teaching him a lesson without saying a word. The crowd is still. Some people look at each other, their faces showing signs of shock and respect. No one expected the situation to turn out like this. The fighter's calm response is the complete opposite of what anyone had anticipated. After a few moments, the fighter stands up, releasing the man's wrist gently. He doesn't wait for a reply, doesn't give the man a second chance to challenge him again. He just turns and begins to walk away, his steps slow and steady. The drunk man slowly gets to his feet, his body stiff and unsure. His face is a mixture of confusion and embarrassment, his pride bruised more than his body. He looks around at the crowd, but no one's laughing anymore. The room is quiet, the tension hanging thick in the air. The fighter has already turned away, walking back toward the bar without a second glance. People are still trying to process what they just saw, unsure if it was real or some kind of trick. The drunk man stands there for a few moments, his eyes scanning the room, realizing the situation has completely changed. The fighter's actions have left a lasting impression. The atmosphere in the bar shifts. What had been a lively, noisy environment is now filled with an undercurrent of something else. Respect. The whispers that ripple through the room are quiet, but carry weight. There's no laughter, no mocking tone. The people who witnessed what happened are talking, but it's different now. There's a sense of awe in their voices, a kind of understanding that wasn't there before. Some of them glance over at the man still sitting on the floor, struggling to regain his footing. His hands shake as he tries to push himself up, but there's no rush in his movements. He's humiliated, trying to salvage whatever pride he can, but everyone in the room can see the truth. He started this whole thing, throwing the first insult, shoving the fighter, pushing for a fight. But now it's clear, he's the one who's lost. His pride is shattered, his challenge nothing more than a foolish mistake. The crowd watches him, but there's no sympathy in their eyes. No one feels sorry for him. They can see that he brought this upon himself, that he misjudged the situation completely. The fighter didn't have to lay a hand on him in anger. He didn't need to resort to violence to show who was in control. The drunk man, on the other hand, had underestimated the power of restraint, and now the reality of it was sinking in. As the man struggles to stand, a few eyes shift away, uninterested in his failed attempt to regain his composure. It's as if the whole room has moved on from him, leaving him to face the consequences of his own actions. The air in the bar has shifted. What was once an uncomfortable standoff has turned into something else entirely. The drunk man is no longer the center of attention. Instead, it's the unspoken admiration for the fighter that fills the space. And that's something that can't be taken away, no matter how hard the man tries to save face. A couple of regulars in the back of the bar exchange a glance, their eyes meeting for just a brief moment, before they both nod. They've seen it all before. Loud mouths who think they can take on anyone, always looking for a fight with the wrong person. It's almost like a weekly ritual in the bar. Someone gets too drunk, says something they shouldn't, and challenges the wrong person, but this time it was different. They've watched fights break out before, heard the typical boasts and threats, but this time, the fighter didn't play by the usual rules. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He didn't need to show off his strength or rush into a fight. Instead, he simply showed everyone the quiet power that comes with knowing your own limits. Some people don't need to fight to win. They just know when to act, how to control a situation without ever raising their fists. The regulars share a look of quiet understanding. They've just witnessed something more profound than the usual bar scuffle. The fighter didn't need to show force. He demonstrated restraint, and that was far more powerful than any punch could ever be. Meanwhile, the man who had been taunting the fighter is stumbling away from the scene, his pride completely shattered. His steps are shaky, his face flushed with embarrassment. He's trying to salvage whatever he can of his dignity, but it's clear it's too late. He glances nervously around the room, but he can't meet anyone's eyes. His head hangs low as he walks, too humiliated to even think about looking at the fighter, who has already turned his back on him. There's no fight left in the man, just a sense of defeat that he can't escape. The fighter finishes his drink with slow, deliberate movements. He doesn't rush. He doesn't glance around the bar, seeking praise or approval. He simply takes a sip, sets the glass down quietly, and calmly reaches for his wallet. He pays the bartender without a word, his actions still carrying the same sense of quiet confidence. As he sets the money down, his hands are steady, his expression unreadable. He doesn't need applause or recognition. He's not looking for attention. He's already done what he came here to do. Around him, the bar starts to settle back into its usual rhythm. The noise picks up again as conversations resume, but there's a subtle shift in the air. The whispers about what just happened continue to float between the tables, but the tone is different now. The respect for the fighter is palpable, even if no one is saying it out loud. The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't get angry or make a spectacle. He simply handled the situation with control and calmness, leaving everyone in the room with a deep sense of respect. The fighter didn't need to say anything for them to understand exactly who he was. The fighter doesn't look back. He doesn't pause to see if anyone is watching him leave. He simply walks toward the door, his steps sure and steady. As he pushes open the door and steps outside, he blends into the night. The cool air hits him as he disappears into the darkness. He isn't looking for acknowledgement. He doesn't care if anyone knows his name. In fact, the anonymity seems to suit him perfectly. The people in the bar might never know his name, but they won't forget what happened. They won't forget how, in one quiet, controlled moment, he showed them what real strength looks like. What happened here will stay with them, hanging in the air long after the night has ended. And even though the fighter walked out without fanfare, without a single word, there's an undeniable sense that his presence will linger far longer than any of the noise that had filled the room before.